Okay, Rusty.
Pink Floyd.
Give him your own name. Just call him Chuck. All right. Guess we should get started. So the way I thought we would take this, and we've all heard comments from citizens and everything, had something to think about it. Figure we go around the table, get everybody's thoughts on it. As the chief alluded, I did kind of talk to him last week about what can we put together, what is something that you would be comfortable that the officers could enforce, things like that. And the chief decided to go out and do some research of like communities around, and in normal fashion, he went from research to, well, here's some proposed wording. So, or some possible.
So is this your possible wording or this is the current ordinance, correct?
No, this is a concept.
No, this is.
So, okay, so where this came from. So taking in, so after that meeting with public discussion, there were citizens that talked to me, sent some letters to Janelle, as their voices were heard. So the mayor, because a lot of times it's a struggle for councils to come up with wording, how to word something. So what I did is I came up with a concept and hearing all the voices that can maybe find a middle ground. This format is just like what the legislature does. They start out with something and then you can change it, you can move it, you can say I don't like it. So I did some research. So one of the ideas that came out there was about what if we have trailers from this point to this point and then don't allow them the rest of the year? So I said, okay, well, let's see if there's anybody in the state that even does that. So there's 3 communities that I found as I was researching different communities. Powell, Rollins, and Gillette, I found similar wording to what this is. Most of them were somewhat within the Memorial Day and Labor Day. There was a couple news articles out of Powell where the concerns were, well, okay, for those with campers, it takes a day or two to load them, so we want to get some time before and or after. So I looked at it and said, okay, so for our community as a concept, if this is what you guys want to look at or consider, a week or so before each of the dates. Now the dates, because of Memorial Day and a Labor Day, the dates fluctuate a little bit. So that's why I put this, 10th of September, May 15th to kind of infuse the fluctuation in the calendar each year. So in looking at the state, the majority of communities are between 48 and about 72 hours period, and then the trailers have to be gone. Below that, I found there was quite a few that have something similar between a 5 and 7 day and any given 30 days. One of the difference was they don't seem to be positively or actively enforced, where the other one was more enforced. And then below that is these other concepts. Now there were some more restrictive, as 24 hours to get the trailers out of here. Each community obviously is different. So in this discussion and listening to what everybody has had to say, this is why I put this concept together, because I don't know that going away, finding the middle ground for people who don't want trailers versus people who want trailers, and for the enforcement side on our end, where do you find the middle ground? So I tried to come up with a concept that maybe works for both sides. So we don't have trailers 24 hours a year, year round. But then for those who have trailers, that's your primary. Now, it's something I did do. I reached out, talked to the different officers. I said, okay, so from your guys, you patrol the community. Granted, I go out and patrol as well. Choke points was a big thing they brought up. I was driving around, it's like on 3rd Street, there's a trailer down here now. You have to cross that middle yellow line to go around the trailer. 6th Street, we have a couple trailers. parked across from each other. And you'll see in here, like, and for a week, I went back and forth because there was a lot of concerns about what if they park across from each other? Well, how do you address that? Now, do we want to be a heavy-handed community and we just cite everybody, or do we want to have this to where everybody kind of works at it civilly to, being able to get along? So when you see this thing in here about the two trailers across from each other, that was the best thing I could come up with to address it civilly. But again, it's a concept. So that's part of the discussion. So choke points, narrow streets, having to go, crossing the other lane of traffic when you go around, were the consensus with most of the officers. One talked about how a lot of, some of the yards are smaller, and there's not, like they park a trailer and sometimes it overlaps in the neighbor's area. There was two that were like, they should just be limited time in the officer's opinion. So the majority, that was just their concerns with the safety side. So again, purely concept. So you guys have a start point of discussion.
Yes, thank you. I guess with that, everybody's opinions on how everything went with the public comments, ideas on
I think,
what they'd like to see.
me personally, would like the public comments. It seemed like it was a little bit more heavy-handed up towards the just getting rid of it side of it. I'm not totally for that myself, only for the fact that, reading these other emails that we've getting or we've gotten, we got the older Evansville, you got the newer subdivision. I mean, we got smaller roads, bigger roads. I mean, I've noticed that even since we started doing, going over this, seems like people have been getting a little bit more relaxed and just parking it anyway, even though that we do have a current ordinance in place right now. Chief mentioned 6th Street. I know that because that's where I live. I've noticed that there's been some trailers there that they haven't even moved. And so we definitely need to do something, in my opinion, to make everybody accountable for, some of the citizens basically said, hey, let's all have some common sense. People's common senses are different. So we need to have something set in place. And I think it's not just getting rid of it. So I kind of went over this just now. I mean, I'm liking, I've got to go over it a little bit more. I mean, some of the wording, most of the wording is definitely been thought through, and thank you, Chief, for doing this because it saves us a lot of hassle. Time frames. I mean, I don't know what everybody is thinking of, but I think that I'm gonna stop right there for now.
I'm stuck with
Yeah,
all
I'm gonna
kinds
read a
of
little bit
needs.
more.
I guess my first thought is enforcement. Even last year and this year, Mike, I heard you talk about, whether or not if we can enforce it. And Brandy sent me some emails regarding whether or not if we can enforce it and things like that. So let's just say this proposed idea, how would we actually enforce it? Because in the last meeting, I remember you saying that, we just don't have the manpower to do that. So peace officers may take enforcement action when a formal complaint is filed. Know what the proper format is, because it seemed that some people didn't know what that format was or how that plays out. But then it also goes into that enforcement piece. That's my first thought is no matter what we do, whether we keep it on the time frame or whatever, there's still that enforcement piece of how are we going to enforce that? Because I mean, like you said, we're not going to be able to please everybody, which that's not the point of this. The point is trying to find a compromise. But I'm just wondering about that.
So that's part of why I worded it this way was for the enforcement. So it's complaint driven because one citizen has an issue versus maybe somebody else, and if somebody calls and complains, then we know there's a contention point, we're gonna deal with it. And if it's clearly a safety thing, so the guys, they're talking about choke points and stuff like that. So as you go through the rest of this, so it's basically, so I'm gonna start from May 15th on through September 10th. So they can have their trailers. Now, that said, if they're within 20 feet of an 25 feet, if somebody calls and complains or an officer sees it, because that's a safety thing of view on an intersection. I talked to Leo about fire hydrants. 15 feet, he is okay with. He says the standard is 10. He says, but 15 is better because it gives them more room. So when you read about the 12 inches from the curb, because if you look, occasionally somebody will park farther away from the curb, so that pushes them into the lane of travel. So that's why I specifically worded 12 inches. Some people work as far as 18 because we have wide streets and narrow streets. A narrow street, if they're 18 inches from the curb in itself, how far does that push it in the lane of travel? So I define that. Now, if you want it to be less, we can say 6 inches or whatever you guys want to say. Again, this is totally conceptual. So when you go to the next page, it talks about alleyways. So as you're going up and down alleyways, there needs to be a flow of traffic, so if there's an emergency, at least 10 feet through there. So that kind of addresses so that we're not having this stuff. So easy for us to enforce whether we see it or somebody complains about it, because then we can address it right there. It's defined in our ordinance. When you look at, so one thing I found, because one of the things that came up was, well, what about if they just drive around the block and say, well, we moved it? Okay. Weirdly, I found a community that defined that. Now they define it as 30 minutes and it wouldn't be applicable. So I thought about that and I said, okay, so to save it, to help us with the enforcement of the stuff down the road. And I looked at it and I said, okay, well, if this is something you want to go with or change it, if we're only going to allow 48 hours and the off time between September 15th, May 15th, then we might as well just make it 48 hours so that the trailer got to be gone. So if she calls as a complaint, and I'm just using an example.
No, yeah, that's fine.
So, and, like the trailer's been here, hey, it's got to go. They can't just take her on block. It's got to be gone 48 hours. It means they got to find somewhere else other than here. And you'll understand some of this as I put it together, because there's a portion in here where it has to be parked directly in front of their house. And only if they get permission from the neighbor can they park it elsewhere. So it's a flowing enforcement so that they can't just move around the block, park it from somebody else's house. So that way it doesn't show up in front of Mike Scott's house. Like, hey, I don't want this thing in front of my house, because not everybody wants that in front of their house. But if they have permission, if he doesn't care, like she says, hey, can I bring my trailer over for a little bit? And he's like, yeah, I'm okay with it. He's okay with it. So as it's flowing, so it gives us some time, so it deals with just moving for 12 hours or whatever.
And the secured permission from the registered owner versus the neighbor, how would the permission be secured?
You're gonna have to go up, knock on their door, and be civil. Hey neighbor, hey, I got this trailer. You care if I park over here? Because I don't have enough room over here, or I got something going on. And if you're happen to be the neighbor, you're like, oh hey neighbor, yeah, no, it kind of bothers me because I got a bunch of people coming and going. All right, can't park there.
I just wanted clarification
Yeah.
on that.
Something I noticed, there was a couple trailers that drive around, like they run their electrical cords out to charge batteries or, whatever. So I defined hoses, electrical cords, drain, thing that obstructs a sidewalk, which could be the stairway, out, because we've got a couple where they've left them out and it's partially blocking the sidewalk. And we have a few people like to utilize our sidewalk. So we definitely want that blocked. So I defined it as they can't be obstructing unless they are actively loading and unloading, actively doing it. So it's not like you park it there and we show up 12 hours later because Janelle calls, hey, oh, we're loading. Or are you actively doing it? Well, no, I was, I'm loading it for the next 24. No. You got to be going in and out, because that way, if somebody's walking down the street, you see what's going on. And then once you go to bed for the night, pack that stuff up, clear the sidewalk.
Well, and that's one of my concerns also too, is because I've driven around here recently and I've noticed a couple of them hooked up to trucks with the, with the power cord going there, and they just keep them there. So, because I know that if it's hooked up to the truck, they're thinking, hey, it's going to be legal no matter what, because they're going to be moving it back and forth, whatever. But they're still, they're not currently using it. It's just, it's hooked up.
Right.
I'm a believer that, it's like, these people, myself included, when we buy a recreational vehicle, we should be able to, park it, or at least find somewhere to park it, without having any kind of obstruction. So that's my biggest thing too.
So one of the other discussion pieces was about front yards. That was a lengthy discussion. If there's going to be a change, this is the time to make that change. So when you see, let's see, okay, so G, now what version you're seeing encompasses all trailers. I kind of felt it was best if we're going to make a change, we just need to encompass all trailers and RVs. Because if you get one camper and you get a boat parked across from it on 6th Street, because boats are not necessarily encompassed because,
So can you clarify for me really quick on the word RV? Tell me what you are imposing by saying RV.
RV is recreational vehicle.
Okay, what are you,
So, okay, so you have recreational trailers, and there was a discussion about, well, I'll just go get a recreational
Exactly,
vehicle.
that's why
Okay.
I'm asking.
So because some people, there's other communities that have RVs specific, like motorhomes versus trailers. So encompassing it all, recreational vehicles, trailers, period, in this order. So I have a different version that just is recreational RV campers, just in case you don't want to encompass trailers with this. Okay. So
Would this end up covering, so a couple of the people who came and talked last year and they came and talked this year, they were talking about don't take away people's livelihoods, don't take away trailers and flatbeds and things like that, where that's their livelihood and that's where they make their cash. So I'm just wondering.
it's all encompassed. When I get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, it's on the backside.
Okay. So basically, any trailer RV shall be parked by the curb on the street in front of the residence occupied by the registered owners. We talked about permission. Then it goes into because one of the concerns, what about two trailers parked across the road? So I was like, okay, so this is going to be a good one. How do we solve this civilly in our community? Right? Not the easiest thing. So I said, okay, what about first come, first serve? Why not use that concept? So should two trailers RVs be parked across from one another on any town, street, highway, causing a complaint or safety concern to the public, the second person to park shall be the one to move. It cannot be determined who parked there first or addressed civilly by both owners. They can both just move their trailers for 72 hours. And then whoever's first come.
first serve.
Great.
So at 12:01 a.m. I can bring my trailer home because technically it's the next day.
First come, first serve. So 72 hours if they both have to move them. Because again, I think we should try to be neighborly and civilly, through this process.
Absolutely.
Now, this was like, how do we address it so we can all work together? Then under I, no RV or recreational trailer or travel trailer shall be parked in the open space from the front of the residence extending full width of the lot to the curb so as to not block the view of the posted address front door or access sidewalk from the curb. Exceptions are designated parking that is on the side of the residence or the backyard. So basically it says you can't just park it on your lawn in front of your house. It has to either be on the side of the house, because again, and Leo brought this up about addressing, which not just upon addressing, if the camper's sitting there and your husband's having a heart attack, they may not be able to get that caught in your residence. It becomes cumbersome for our first responders to have to work around this stuff. So plus the appeal of the community, it looks more appealing, not so junky. One of our older residents had a lengthy conversation with me about, I don't want it to look junky. It looks really clean, and she views trailers being junky. So that's why I put that in there to address the comments made about parking in the front yard.
Well, sometimes I would say that when people have their RVs, trailers, whatever, parked in front of their house on the street, anyway, it obstructs the view of the visual letters of their home anyway. thank God that you guys have a, what is it called, CAD system or
CAD.
something like that to show you, but.
Right. So because it's a public street, and we're addressing, if you're gonna park there, they gotta at least be on the curb. So if you're coming at an angle, at least it doesn't totally obstruct,
Mhm.
and there, you don't have to worry about being, 'cause I think the trailer down here is like 3 or 4 feet from the front door. So imagine trying to take, that heavy cumbersome cot, for fire hoses or whatever, around the corners. And now again, conceptual, that's why we're talking about it. You guys can make adjustments or notes in here. So the penalty, and again, totally up to you guys. So I just put in a penalty: complaint initiated offense, fine should be $75 a day upon conviction in the court. And trailer RV is still present in violation 12 hours after the conviction, then it should be towed. So basically, as you go through this, you'll see that any person shall not be in violation of this section if the person removes the vehicle or trailer from the town, street, alleyway within 24 hours after the notice of the complaint driven violation has been posted. Again, I think it's good to look, try to work this civilly within the community. So if they move it within 24 hours, hey, not to be in court, everybody's happy, trailer, the issue's done. If they don't, we issue the citation. And then for every day that it sits there, it gets fined $75 a day. And then if they still don't move it after the court, now you guys can totally change that up. It's just a concept. And then to address contractor about these contractor trailers. Okay, so for the off times or even throughout the year, if contractors are coming in, come get a permit from the PD. We're not gonna charge them anything so that we know the trailer's there. If somebody calls and complains, be like, well, technically I have a permit because they're working on the residence.
No,
And we-
but she doesn't mean that. She means like, let's say I have a roofing company and I bring my trailer home and I'm going to do Chad's house tomorrow, his roof or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I mean, like.
So here's
that
here's something on that though.
My thought is most of the time during the day, those trailers are gone because they're at work.
My opinion on that though is, it's like, I'm kind of seeing where the chief is coming around getting a permit. They can come down here and explain that they have a business. This is what they do. Then yes, we're going to not even charge them for the permit. We just know that it's there. Now, if we don't, somebody can just pull a flatbed trailer and say, hey, it's my work trailer. And no, it's actually for their 4-wheelers or whatever. And so as long as we're not charging them, I'm good with that.
Yeah, it's just so we know.
Maybe
So
to
if
change
somebody
the
calls
wording
and
of the
complains,
contractor is.
is this trailer? It's been
that
there
wording is
3 days.
not
Okay, well,
clear.
they
Yeah,
have a
there's
permit,
definitely,
they're working
there's
on it.
definitely stuff that.
And we
Yeah.
know that it's gonna be there
Yeah.
from this point to this point in the time frame that they give us, so that we know how long it's gonna be there. Now, for like people that use them as a business, I don't know that fall, I think it just falls directly into this, because if they're running a business out of their house, they should have a business permit in the first
Mhm.
place. So they shouldn't be parking that stuff there. So in general, if it's a contracting trailer and they're not working in the residence and that's just where they live, I think it falls right back underneath all of this, in my opinion. Now, again, concept, if you want something, if you guys come to agreement, and you want something defined in here, I think we can define it.
Mhm.
Again, just a start point, you guys. You can say, you know what, we don't like any of this, scratch, scratch, scratch. That's why there's lines in here, because you can say, you know what, okay, I don't like this distance, or I don't like that. You can change it, and you can write something in there, and we can reformat. You can say, I don't like this concept, period. I want something totally different that just says no trailers, 40, I don't know, whatever you want. I'm just giving you a start point.
The other question I had was about safety. Last year and this time around, everybody was talking about safety. So I'm just wondering, I mean, I think a lot of these things that are in this concept are all things that people have brought up in the last year. And I know that a lot of people brought up safety, safety, safety. This is about safety. So I'm just wondering, where is the safety?
Yeah.
Like, How,
Well,
because I know that people want to hear about that and they want to understand it. So I'm
this
just
is where
want to make sure we wrap
this
our
is a
mind around
council
that piece.
discussion.
Yeah.
So there was a couple news articles I found about 2018-ish, one Casper, one Cheyenne. Casper was very much, oh, we're going to clamp down-ish type mentality. And Cheyenne, they totally like, because the chief came in with the data and says, yeah, well, there's literally no crashes with trailers. And they're like, okay, safety issue. That's completely up to you guys, is how you want to view that. Because Casper, so our current ordinance mirrors Casper's, and I'm guessing that goes back to when everything Casper did, we automatically did. We don't have to be that way, obviously. So I think it's really up to you guys to decide whether you feel it's safety or not safety in that realms. Because of the arguments, and Cheyenne and Casper are similar in population size. The politics are different, obviously, the social side of things. So, I didn't bring the map up. White Off brought me a map, I don't know, it was last week or the week before, crashes in town. We listed the one trailer crash. Everything else was vehicle crashes, more like hit and run type concepts or drunk driving type stuff. So we didn't have a ton of crashes in the residential area.
Well, and
But
that's,
again, where is, the community, what is your view set is?
and I'm kind of looking at I know one of the citizens they had mentioned, maybe in the future, maybe widen up the roads a little bit. Fortunately, we can't just widen the roads now. We have to consider both, some of the older residents and then the newer residents, a little bit wider roads. So, I mean, when it comes down to safety, that is going to be a big issue for me. And I was going to mention that too, is it's like, the summer months, I think whatever we do, and this is my personal opinion, whatever we do, it should be year round.
Yeah, I agree.
Because, we do need to make them accountable, and we also need to make it as easy as possible for law enforcement to, instead of saying, hey, one date to another date.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Safety,
I would just
yeah.
say like strike out on 16. I don't know the number, but I'm gonna say number 16.
Well, I mean, kids come out.
The dates
yeah.
on that, that's what I would say we strike out is the September 10th through May 15th on this particular thing. I don't know.
So what we're specifically saying is that we want to have an ordinance that is enforced all the time. Is that what we're saying?
That's what I would,
I think,
that's,
But then it goes
Right.
back to my first question, who's enforcing it and how are we gonna make it happen? And how is it gonna be different than where it's at now? Because I mean, I was diligently listening to you in the meeting when you said, we don't have the manpower, we have more important things to be doing right now. I just want to make sure that whatever our decision is, we're not making more work for you guys when you guys should be
Well,
focusing on,
I think.
I mean, I'm sorry to say, more important things,
I think
drugs,
Right. I think sticking to
chases.
complaint-driven enforcement, because we can't be everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
we're a small community, but if we only got, okay, so I use Friday night, we got this crazy pursuit going on. And so, well, I got two guys drenched to the bone chasing our armed robber dudes down. I'm taking a domestic. Who else is patrolling the town? So complaint-driven, because the eyes of the community and working with the community, and you asked earlier about, well, how do they know? Well, we can educate the community, like, hey, if you get, I mean, again, sometimes you move over when you see emergency vehicles, you have to readdress and re-educate that stuff. So I think we can educate, we put a flyer billing, like, hey, if you have complaints, please go through this process so that everybody gets it and we can educate. So by a complaint driven, that way, whatever you guys decide, whether it's so many hours or no trailers or from this time, whatever you guys decide, as long as it's complaint driven, the enforcement makes it easier for us that way. Because then we know, here's a contention point, let's address it. Because what's a contingent point on one street may not be a contingent point on the other streets, or maybe it skips 3 streets and there's another contingent point. So that way it's citizens' eyes and what their issues are.
So, Janelle, I guess this would be a question for you, because we had a lot of residents coming in and saying, obviously, we're always going to have residents coming in and saying, we didn't see this, we didn't hear about this, that, and the other. I mean, we heard lots of people say these things. And so I'm just wondering if we're looking at that re-education piece, how far do you think that we would have to go in order to make sure that everybody's aware? I mean, are we talking like a big sign? Are we talking everything on the bills? Are we talking a big flyer? And even at that point, I mean, yes,
Social
we're
media
going to have
billing.
people that
The
don't.
sign would be too confusing, but a well outlined thing with billing, included with billing, and like a social media thing,
Mhm.
I think would,
So,
would
and
help.
we can maybe put something on the sign as, the message board that says, please see new trailer parking ordinance.
Right,
Mhm.
or,
Like that.
check your billing for updated something.
So I have
So-
a question about that, actually. So you say complaint driven. Here's my thought. Within lieu to our last council meeting, there was a person that had come in and said, there's this boat trailer and this RV that are parked the wrong way on the wrong side of the street. My thought, that should be something that an officer or code enforcement addresses. It shouldn't have to be a complaint driven thing. That needs to be I need to address that.
Well, and how that format, that wasn't the appropriate way to come in to do it.
I agree, but I'm just saying that was like an example that popped in my head.
Right, so, and ironically, after explaining twice in a council meeting, call dispatch, they take and make the case, then there's a CR number, and it starts with the year. and
I
then it
understand that,
closes.
but if they're patrolling, it shouldn't have to go to a complaint driven. If I'm patrolling and I see that that is adamant, I need to address that.
Okay, so here's one reason we got 2 trailers on 6th Street. New resident. The only reason I even know, because let's say Chad lives in Casper, Wyoming.
Okay.
And that's where his trailers are registered.
Okay.
And then he moves to Evansville. If he doesn't update his registration, we're not gonna go and bang on every door on the block to figure out where he lives. Because if he's in a rental house, they don't always have that information up there because of the landowner.
I agree, and with that, when you key in that plate in your computer, it tells you the phone number, everything about that person.
So give me extra manpower.
So be it, so moved.
So like,
Then the code enforcement person, after they see that they're several days or whatever, put that little yellow thing on there, like they do when your weeds are 6 feet high.
so 96, and as an example, in June, 96 weed and grass notices were given out. 96 notices that need follow-up on. They only work 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday. So when you have 96 notices, and then you have dog complaints because they're out biting somebody, or, coons in a dumpster, oh my God, they're gonna die. Where do you prioritize the time for trailers? That's why I'm asking for complaint-driven stuff, because that way it's that particular citizen. If they have that issue, hey, that way it points the officer to that specific spot. Because again,
But if they're patrolling and they see that it's parked on the wrong side of the road, it should be able to be addressed. It shouldn't have to be a complaint-driven thing by a citizen, or else, it's multitasking. Janelle works in an office, she can be reading an email, fax comes in, and on the phone at the same time, with you or him or whoever. I did it today in the office I worked at.
But then that would mean that, on the flip side, then that would mean that we would be playing the what if game on whether or not
It's
if
what
the
if, because
officers are
here's the what if.
seeing
you
that
see an
boat on the
officer
wrong
driving
side of
down
the road.
street. What if they're actually going to follow up at her house from when her husband beat her?
Yeah, that
That's
didn't
time
happen by
That
the way.
doesn't take 8 hours.
By the way.
It doesn't, but what I'm saying is.
Time
what if?
management, use
Because-
your time effectively.
Because,
One day he's picking up on safety belts,
well, I'm taking applications.
great.
Well, we
So-
can't make
But-
an assumption. An
No.
officer sees something every time he's going around. They've got
Because-
jobs they're going to do.
but
I
I
understand that, but it's still a
So-
it's still a common thing. You're still looking. I'm not just saying, oh, I'm just driving. It's still something that can be seen. If you can see it, I'm saying, if I can clearly see this trailer or boat, whatever, is parked on the wrong side of the street facing the wrong way, I'm not necessarily saying, hey, you can't go deal with that domestic violence because this needs to be addressed. But there is times when you can, you're on your way patrolling, just driving through, and you see that. Just like,
But I do think that okay. So I'm just going to back up for a second because I feel like this is turning into a different direction. I do think that everybody's points at the table are valid, absolutely. But I do think that we have to find some middle ground and compromise because we can't be playing off of what ifs and assumptions because that's where emotional reactions take place when we're making choices and decisions regarding this stuff. I think that it's very clear because I've had lots of interactions with your police officers in Evansville recently for my clients and lots of other things that have taken shape. And I swear I was with your officers for 2 hours that night at midnight with my client and your officers because of that one situation. And I just think about how long these interactions last, because I personally, on my end, I've been a social worker for 16 years. These interactions are not quick. They're not easy. We don't know if your police officers are seeing these things or they're not seeing these things. I get what you're saying about the safety piece, and that should be something that they should be looking for. Absolutely. But then you get somebody like me that, calls up at midnight with their client who's, has some stuff going on, and then you're with them for 2 hours. And then it does come down to, well, where's our need at there? But on the other hand, I mean, I do think that we need to consider and think about, yes, we have a shorting staffage type deal happening. We've got safety happening. We've got a lot of different things that are happening here, but I think that the reason why, and Mike, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the reason why you want to do the complaint driven piece is to try to help you guys out. I could be wrong, but to try to help you guys out, to try to help the process move into a direction. Because what I hear you saying now and what I heard you say a year ago and the other night is that you don't have the manpower to enforce these things. So even if we're driving around and we're doing all this stuff, they might not see it because they might get a call from somebody like me in the middle of the night that is taking up 2 to 3 hours of your officer's time now because of something.
Correct.
Okay, do I hear that correctly, or
For the
am I
most part,
not
yes.
hearing that correctly?
For the
Because
most part, yes.
because I
So-
do think that emotions have to stay out of this when we are looking at decisions and choices being made, because this isn't a light topic or discussion, but it's going to be about what's feasible, because you guys are the guys. I'm a citizen in Evansville, but I'm not going to chase down some person. I just don't feel like that's my place at all. I mean, I don't have the training either, but it's not my place at all. But I mean, if we're putting something in place, whatever we put in place, it has to be able to be enforced, because if you're saying I don't have the manpower, then we still have the enforcement issue no matter what we do. But what you're
So-
trying to do is the compromise of the
issue with
complaint-driven
enforcement
focus.
Now, is that every given 30-day, 5-day arguments. And as much as I love sending my people to an interview and interrogation, it is not worth taxpayer money to spend 2 hours interrogating somebody to get the truth about how long the trailer's been there.
Yeah.
I mean, because unfortunately the public just isn't honest. That's a reality. 90% of who we deal with. I mean, the other day during the domestic, we're all soaked to the bone. We don't want to be out there in the freaking weather. I'm in a domestic. We've been there. We know these people are all crazy. We know what's going on. I know the 911 came from the residents, and they still lied to me. Why? I don't know. Why do people lie? I don't know. So if you want us to stop at every trailer because it's parked or it's not supposed to be or backwards, then it needs to be a specific time, 24 hours. And let me tell you, we will put the hammer down and tell them to move their trailers. Because at that ordinance says 24 hours, 48, whatever you decide. But when you have any given 30-day thing, the taxpayer money is by far better worth trying to find the people who are robbing people, prowling your neighborhoods, getting in your cars when you don't leave them locked or unlocked, DUIs, that kind of stuff. That's why they don't stop the trailers, because it's just a trailer alongside a road. And they're looking for the people that are stealing stuff out of your car, or breaking into his house when he's gone, stealing his gun because he's on vacation, or somebody driving drunk down the road, hitting cars that are parked peacefully along the road. So it comes to priority of time. And the perception is, oh, they're out driving by. Why didn't they stop? Well, because when they're going to talk to somebody about a case they're working on, that is the time for an interview. is, hey, I'm gonna be there at 3 o'clock to talk to you about your son stabbing the teacher at school with a rock. So they're expecting us to be there at 3. Well, you stop. Hey, how long's your trailer been there? Well, somebody says they're, 7 days. Well, no. Well, now you spend an hour interrogating to get the freaking truth out of them, because how do you prove on our end how long it's been there unless somebody either is documenting it by video, time frame, because anytime you bring anything to court, you have to have video and audio and a confession for anything to ever happen in court anymore. So where do you want the tax dollars to be spent? Enforcing trailer ordinances when you can show up and spend hours there? So either make it simpler for us to enforce and we'll enforce it, or have it complaint driven so that if you're having the issue, here's the issue. Where somewhere else in the town, maybe they don't have that same issue. One way or the other, it will work, either complaint driven or time sensitive.
So I do have a question about the complaint driven piece. So let's say, for argument's sake, Dacia calls up, says, hey, my neighbor's got a trailer that's been parked there for 7 days, or, whatever the time frame might be. And that's the complaint. And then you guys talk to the person, but then they don't move it for whatever reason, or they move it for like a day and then they move it back, things like that. Then would we be asking for the residents to recall in another complaint? Like, is that what we would need to have happen in order to keep
It's lost.
the ball rolling?
Or is there just a,
follow up? I don't know the right
Yeah.
lingo.
Time.
Okay.
So in the last 2 years, our call loads alone have basically doubled from 3 years ago. We had the same manpower this year, and last year, basically as we did 3 years ago. So finding time, we don't have the time like we used to have.
Well, maybe because we are getting bigger and expanding and adding all these new additions and stuff, maybe it's time we looked at getting extra law enforcement or whatever to meet the needs of the people. If it is that we are growing in the next 20 years or what have you be, you know what I mean?
To do that, you have to have a money base. So unless you have the money base to pay for those positions, that's the only way you gain the positions, is by, just like any business or corporation. Amazon started out as a online book thing. Now they're one of the largest corporations in the world. But to fund the expansion, you have to have a product or a revenue source. We have a revenue source that comes from property taxes, sales tax, tobacco, alcohol, permits, all the stuff. So to add the position, you have to fund it. And if we don't have the funding currently to fund it, then you have to grow before you can do that.
But correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been on your police interview boards before, that in the last several years, you haven't had a lot of applicants who have actually applied, correct? So we not only have a monetary budgeting financial piece, but we also have a applicant shortage issue as well.
We're testing the 30th, and I have 6 applicants.
We're looking at it right now, but we are the lowest paid employees in the county. So that's part of why they've been looking at
we've provided the COLAs and we're doing a compensation study right now. Hopefully that'll be getting a contract together short, but that limits our application pool.
So Chief, if we just, for say, went with the proposed ordinance that you wrote down and got rid of the dates and just went year round for no more than 48 hours. Being that it is complaint driven, I was trying to read through here to see what would help you guys out more, because I'm hearing what, I'm hearing all sides here. And if there isn't any kind of follow-up, then, one of the citizens can call, and then it's like, after that, it's like, well, now they have to call again. Is there a way that at that first complaint, or what would help you guys out, I guess? I mean, I'm trying to think, and I'm.
So so somewhere we're trying to find a balance.
Mhm.
We have some people in the community are like, trailers don't bother me. We have some people that it's like a pet peeve of theirs. How do you find the balance? In the middle, we're stuck having to figure out to enforce this stuff. So make it a time frame. And if we see the trailer's been there 2 hours, or well, it'd be 48 at that point. Fine. Complaint driven, because again, the trailer's next to his house, he doesn't care. Or it's next to yours, because again, we have 24 total trailers. The last time I drove through, we had this conversation. So there's 24 trailers at the time, like 12 meet the matrix of our current ordinance, which is the enforcement issue. So that's why I think across the board is deal with trailers in general. So because whatever we change, well, why aren't you picking on the other trailers? Okay, yeah. Where do you stop with the this and that and the, finding something that works for the community that's enforceable? What can the community live with so that the pet peeve, I don't like trailers versus the people who have trailers can get along and we can keep civility in the community enforcement wise? Prioritizing tax dollars. Would you rather us spend more time making sure people's trailers aren't parked where they're supposed to be, or keeping people that are drunk off the road? I don't know. That's a community discussion. Personally, I think keeping the drunks off the road, and or for every traffic stop you make, and Councilman Scott can probably attest to this, but for every stop that I make, I probably let 15 or 20 go. You want us stopping every violation we see? What kind of time do you get? How much time does that eat up? I mean, think about when you're on patrol, how many violations? Sometimes it's not safe to make a traffic stop simply because the volume of traffic or the intersection, you see the violation.
Well, and that's,
Where
and
do
that's
you
where,
prioritize?
and that's why, and I'm understanding where you're coming from with the prioritizing. And I totally 100% agree that we do need to be focusing on other things, but this is one of the things that is right now a big thing for the citizens. And that's why it's like, at the 48 hours, is it something that, if we call up and complain, or have them complain and say, hey, Chief Thompson, this, for instance, the ones on 6th Street that I drive by, I complain about those ones and say, hey, they're there and they're blocking the view. Being that it's 48 hours, is that going to be enough to where if, you guys do drive by and it's there again, to slap at the tag? Or is it one of those things where, instead of trying to have to call back again, or is that going to be too much time? I mean, I think 48 hours is good, but.
And it's a variable because we can put on that sticker. Now, part of me says it's more appropriate to figure out who owns the trailer. Hey, just, we had a complaint. Make it personable, but what if they're not home? I don't know. How much time do you do follow-ups if they're not home? Or what if they're those people who don't answer the phones or answer their doors because oop, the popo's out there when you're talking to them. How do you address it? So part of me says, knock, talk to them, be civil. If we don't get that, throw a sticker on there. Typically, when you throw that sticker on, you have dispatch reopen the call, comes back up on the board. So you make the complaint on Chad's trailer. He doesn't answer the phone. He's like, I know what they're here and I don't care. So we stick the sticker on there and we flag it to show up the next day. But when it pops up, we might be in the middle of who knows what, and it could still be another 4 or 5 hours before we can come back and deal with it popping back up on CAT.
That and along the road, it could take longer because the tow truck too. So,
Which
it
goes
could take
back
a
to
while.
an enforcement issue, whether or not if we have the manpower to
And
enforce it.
if there's some,
Because it's easy for residents to come here and to say, you need to do this and you need to do that. But if they haven't walked a day in your guys' shoes, I'm sorry. If they have not walked a day in your shoes, then they don't know what you guys do every single day. And for me on my end, that's where I just have to throw my hat in the ring and say, I know how hard you guys work. I've been on patrols with you guys. I've seen what your officers go through. I mean, I've been a social worker for the last 16 years. I've worked with police officers my whole adult life. It's time consuming. And whether we do the formal complaint or we don't, at this point, it still goes back to, yes, we still have two key things, safety and enforcement. And I keep hearing you say that we don't really have the manpower, but I'm trying to find a compromise. So it's almost like I feel like you're Gumby right now, and I feel like we're stretching you to a limit, and you're already stretched to a limit.
So does our
Enough.
enforcement lady only deal with weeds? Is that what she does, is just weeds?
Animal control. She
And
does
that's it.
code enforcement, she does weeds, she does,
And she's stretched thin too.
yeah, like, what was it, 790, or no, I think it was 968 calls last year she did alone. On code violations, weeds and grass, junk, parking.
And
like
when I
abandoned
emailed her, she
cars.
said she'd have to like work like 80 hours even to get through everything that she needed to get through.
So in perspective, comparing, so Mills is roughly a 15-man agency with 2 code enforcement officers. We are a 12-man agency with 1 code man or code person. We've had problem, somebody not getting through the academy that we've tried to fill. So our department did 215 more calls, traffic included, than what a larger department did last year alone
So,
for less money. They work hard here.
so I'm thinking, and this is, me speaking out loud, I'm sure you're not agree with me, so. Right now, what we need to do is we need to figure this out. And then we need to kind of just ask, the citizens, of Evansville to kind of work with us a little bit and we can build up the financial status so we can give you extra help or possibly an extra code enforcement person, because eventually that would be nice to help out the current, code enforcement officer, because she is working a lot of hours, but, and there is a lot of stuff happening here in Evansville. And I know over these last, 2 years that she's been around, or a year that she's been around, it's more been of a back, she's been kind of working backwards and trying to clean up Evansville. Once everything's good, kind of like right now, I mean, it's kind of keeping it up now. So if we could just ask the citizens to kind of just help us out a little bit and say, hey, until we can financially find the money to get you a new officer, get you a new code enforcement person, then, but we need to figure
So
this out.
this is my thought on it. And I know this isn't going to be a popular thought, and that's fine. But my thought on it is, if we can't enforce it, we can't have it as an ordinance right now. If we can't enforce it, we can't have an ordinance right now.
We
That's-
can't-
Enforce it. What helps is if it's complaint driven.
Okay. So,
Will it be addressed the moment you call the complaint in? If we're not doing anything, they're gonna respond.
and maybe that's
If
the educational piece
Mhm.
of, it's not
If-
going to
if
happen
we're
right
so
when
to
you
the
want it to
bone dealing
happen.
with a car sliding on its wheels, when we're done with that and everybody's got some dry clothes on, we'll address it. It may
Yeah.
take some patience and understanding
Mhm.
and time, but it will get addressed. And that's why I have it as a complaint-based wording.
Well, it
Yeah.
goes back into the accountability of the town though, too. It's, if, we want it as ordinance. If it's a problem and somebody is thinking that it's a problem, then we're asking for the help, saying, hey, you know what,
That's their eyes.
call it in, and then they can go, enforce it. But without that being on the book, if somebody calls in and complains about it, then they can't do nothing about it.
So I do think that if we're going to have it that way, then there needs to be something in here that says something to the effect that just because you call a
So-
complaint in does not mean it's going to get handled right away, so that every
Which-
single resident understands that if you guys are dealing with a robber or burglar or whatever it is, that's going to take precedent over a
Before we
regular
tackle
situation.
that, let me offer a suggestion. Let's start at the beginning. You said, let's strike the beginning of September 10th through May 15th. Is that a consensus opinion without making decisions?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so have a discussion about how long do you want to allow a trailer or not allow them at all? Now, I think not allowing them at all is probably unreasonable because people have trailers and contractors. So have the, okay, do we want to allow them 48 hours, 24 hours, 10 hours? Have that discussion. Let's work that problem first. I think that's reasonable. We can work out the other stuff as we go through it. So let's start with that area.
Well, we've already got it in place for 7 days, and that already seems to be an issue. So if we go 48 hours, because the people that were here last year and the people that came this time, there was that discussion about how long does it take to get your camper and your RV, and how long does it take to get it all prepared and ready to go. And I'm not a trailer camper person, so I don't know how long it takes to get one of those set up and get it going.
Now, if I'm reading this right, it's 48 hours in a row, correct? Instead of, because right now it's the 7 days in a 30-day period. And so, and we had mentioned possibly doing it like an 8-day in a 30-day period, because then that would give the 48 hours basically per week. And like this, it says it's 48 hours in a, consecutive 48 hours. And that would give plenty of time. And then it would almost, be better, in my opinion, to enforce when the enforcement's necessary, because then they can say, hey, 48 hours started then, instead of, okay, did they have it 2 weeks ago? Because, on the street for 2 or 3 days, and then now they have it on the street again for 2 days. And then how many more days do they have?
So then we're talking about taking it from 7 days to 2 days.
2 days.
Strike the 30 days.
Okay.
That's so
they could
that's probably the bigger contention enforcement part for us when it comes to time.
Okay.
Is who's keeping track? When does it start? When does it stop?
Mhm.
If you want to keep what we have, just define the 30 days. Starts from September 1st to September 30th. That's your given 30 days, and only 5 or 7 days within the month. But define it.
Because the way it's written here, to the way I'm reading it, is they can technically have it 48 hours and then they can move it and come back. I mean,
Well,
I'm almost.
now,
well-
if you stick with that, but then you go back here to
Mhm. to the where they just move it for like
right,
a
they have to
little
move
bit
it
and
for
then
48 hours.
yeah, they move it for 48
So
hours.
that would resolve just going around the block.
Yeah, so they basically they go camping for for a weekend. They load it one day, because I mean you could even knock it down even more. I don't want to knock it down more, but I mean you could, and then it's like they load it, camping, load it, unload. But no, I think 48 hours at any given time is good.
So we're saying 7 days to 2 days, taking out 30 days. They have to load, go camping or whatever they're doing, unload, and then the camper has to go somewhere.
Yes, they have to leave for the 48 hour, up to 40 hours. So, I mean, you got 30 days in a month. I mean, you can, my math's not right.
So
You could take
48 hours to load, whatever, then it's got to be gone 48 hours before it can come back.
Cool down. Yeah, cool down. So,
So
in theory, it could be like up to, almost 10 days a month right now, or so.
well,
That's
it
just
wouldn't
rough.
even be in a
Yeah,
month.
yeah.
If
Well,
you-
if we kept the 30 days.
right, if you kept the 30 days, and you would have to define it. So
Just
but
again,
again,
in comparison.
then are we going to be out marking tires to decide how long they've been there? Okay, so
And that's where I think that takes too much time personally.
Well, and that's why I think 48 hours is good, is because then, here's the thing is, most officers work, multiple days in a row. I mean, it's like if you got, if you're on patrol and you're cruising around and you get that complaint and that same officer, boom, comes around, then, unless it's their last day working, but,
The other thing that I like about it is that that's providing that cool down. Because one of the issues we've always got is you've got a loading and an unload. And I can tell you personal experience, I can do the loading in the night because I'm excited to go camping. When I get home, I can't do it in the night because I'm just woke and I'm dead. And usually by the time I park, all I want to do is go sit
Sleep.
down
Yep,
and come back the next day.
yes.
So
That's
that
where-
provides, hey, if I'm going to go camping next week, well, I get it out, I bring it back Friday for my load, and I've met the criteria of the 24 or 48 hour cool down.
And that's why I like, how we were discussing the extra, like the 8th day last year.
Exactly.
Is because of
Yep.
the exact same.
The front end and
thing,
back.
that unloading portion of it. We do have a little extra time. But, you know, if we're doing it just 48 hours, then I think it'd be a little, you know, if you're saying it's a little bit easier to monitor, then
48 hours. and they
especially on
gotta
the
be gone.
complaint driven.
48 hours gone or be gone 72. I mean, you can define how long they got to be gone. So you take 48 is 2 days, 72 is 3 days. I mean, you can define it. Say, okay, you're loading and your load up or your cool down's 48. They got to be gone in between that. I don't know. Is that what you want to do?
I think, you know, on like the 40, most people go from Friday to Sunday. Okay, they go for their weekend. So having it be gone for 72, having that extra third day, then they're gonna have to park their rig somewhere else on Monday when they come back, or Sunday night, you know, so it's not there Monday. So I think that 48 hours is because I'm looking at a Friday to Sunday type of thing. People want to
So
go
if
camping
it's
on
there
every
for
weekend.
48, it's 48.
People want to camp on the weekends, they can do it.
And what you're saying is it's feasible, it's more feasible for enforcement purposes.
It is because it's not defining a
Okay.
30-day thing. No.
I feel like it's still giving.
No, we'll get to the enforcement side of this.
Okay.
Let's just work it down. So right now, your consensus 48 hours, and then it needs to be gone 48 hours. Is that
Yes, that's,
But then they can bring it back 48 hours? Is that what I heard
after
you
Yes.
guys say?
48 hours?
yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a note, 48 hours. Okay, and then I can always rework it if you want me to word it. Okay, so moving on, so B, parking within 20 feet of an intersection or obstructing any emptying of dumpsters and or roll-out garbage cans prohibited. Discussion.
I think,
Now, with the public works, things like that, I think that's just a matter of just getting everything going through. If you discussed with everybody on that, I think that's
Any
fair enough.
changes?
Is it 25 feet of an intersection or is it 30?
25.
Okay.
Some places it's 20, I take middle ground, I
Okay.
take 25.
Good.
Okay, all right, hearing no changes, moving on to C. Parking within 15 feet of a fire hydrant or more than 12 inches from the curb prohibited. Discussion,
Leo was good with it, I'm good with it.
okay?
is
Yeah,
that how
I
much
mean,
room
it's
Leo
like-
needs?
Yeah, the fire code's 10 feet, so we did an extra 5.
Okay.
Okay. Did he say how far away from the curb, though? When it comes down to it?
He didn't
or-
have anything in there that was, so one community, as I was looking at their ordinance, they defined it as not more than 18 inches from the curb.
Okay.
Because of our narrow streets, I said 12. If
Okay.
you want to go smaller, we can say 6 inches. It's, again, discussion. So 12 inches is basically
Yeah,
your piece of paper.
piece of paper. So I mean, I'm
So-
good with it.
So if this is your curb and you park 12 inches, it pushes it out into the street, 12 inches. 6
Didn't-
inches.
So I'm inclined, well, I'm on two sides of this fence. I think shorter to give us the roadway. However, having backed up my own trailer and somebody else is there, that's not an easy task. Yes. To get into that. So what looks to me is how far away from the curb, I mean, 12 inches is good, but the more important thing is that you're not in that situation where you're making the drivers cross over into the line of traffic.
So in that discussion, so like third, just to 3 blocks over, there's a trailer. And it's pretty much on the curb, but we still have to cross that yellow line probably by about 2 feet to go around. And it's on the curb. So how do we tackle it? I don't know, because narrow, you take Curtis between 5th and 3rd. It's pretty narrow. So even if it's on the curb, because we had the snow machine trailer, they were parking on the sidewalk, so their thing isn't out on the street. So how do you find the middle ground to address this? So the 15 feet in fire hydrants, I think we're good. So the discussion is how far from the curb, or how do
Almost
we
like
want to address that?
Wasn't Robert saying something in the meeting? I don't know what he called it. He used a specific word. I'm drawing a blank, but it's not a fire hydrant, but he said,
Meter pits, yeah.
yes,
people are
does
blocking
that need to be
We already
somewhere?
have an ordinance that addresses not obstructing that stuff. So I didn't feel the need to draft and put in something, we already have something in place.
I'm
for.
just wondering, like, if someone were like, oh, we have that ordinance, it wasn't in here, I didn't see it, I didn't know.
But
about
we
it.
can reference the other ordinance, because we had a boat, was it 3 years ago, the boat over here, and I told them like either
And
move
we
it or
had to
tow
move it or
So,
something. Yeah,
so I don't think that's a thing we need to discuss. at this
okay.
point.
I have a question on this, I think it's in 13 and 14 on A. Is it in there anywhere, I think we probably already have an ordinance or a statute or something, appendages or whatever, about like, because I know sometimes people have their slides up, which also impedes the flow of
Mhm.
with this, what is it, the roadway,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
no, the flow of traffic, so,
If not, can we put that in there somewhere?
for the discussion, I think it'd be more appropriate to put into F, hoses, electrical, drain pipes, or any other things that obstruct sidewalks. I think adding it to that lineage about slide outs blocking traffic, because it already addresses obstruction.
Sorry, I'll wait till we get
Nope.
there.
And I think blocking traffic and blocking sidewalks.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I
So-
just can't get.
So
Yeah.
in trying to keep some order so that we can move through this.
Yeah, sorry, I'll wait till we get there.
For time,
So,
so I think at this point that the discussion is the 12 inches from the curb prohibited, and whether it's too far, too short, we want more, how narrow streets, wide streets. So
you said that most of the other places have like an 18-inch one. right?
yeah, there was a couple that had
So,
18
and I
inches,
know that
which
they have a
is-
lot bigger roads than us a lot of times, but I'm thinking, normally, when you're backing up a vehicle or anything like that, it shouldn't be more than, another tire width apart. But, I'm good with the 12 if normal, if all the other municipalities have, yeah. Just to keep it, kind of
Okay,
uniform.
any other discussion?
Mhm.
Consensus 12, okay, moving on.
As long as Leo's good with it. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
He's the one that's gotta be able to work
His-
around that
His
piece.
issue is the fire hydrant.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
okay,
Okay.
so D, let's work D. When parking in an alley, there shall be at least 10 feet clearance for traffic. So it's one line, section D. So the idea is you have an alley, so like if this is the table and that's the alley, you got people cards, and some people do occasionally bring stuff into the alley. So I said, if we're gonna make changes, let's just address alleys so that it's addressed. So this is verbatim, and I don't remember which community this came from, but that's what they put in there.
It's
So
10
the
feet,
flow
yeah.
of traffic. Now, that said, a question came about garbage trucks and that
Mhm.
things. Pretty sure we have an ordinance that talks about obstructing garbage trucks. So if it's obstructing that the public works guys can't go through there, we're gonna show up and say, hey, I know it says 10 feet, but it's obstructing that, you gotta move it.
Yeah, because that would be my
Already-
biggest thing is not only just the public works, but then also the fire department. Typically, I know your guys' cruisers can get through it, but between the fire trucks, ambulance, and the public works,
And you could just
Or anybody
simply say, No parking.
other utilities,
and,
yeah.
and you, if you want, because it's a concept, it's a discussion. And if you don't want to deal with 10 feet, you can simply say they can't be parked in an alley. Because of the fence lines, obviously, how do they move over if there's no gate or open way? So if you want, you could say no parking in the alleyway. That makes it really easy for us to enforce, because when we see
I would
it,
be,
Is it for long-term? I have a question on this one. So like, for instance, there's a pothole in my backyard that's in the alleyway that I need to fill. I need to go get some dirt and fill it. So if I, like, let's say on a Saturday morning, I go get the dirt, park the truck in the alley, huff it over the fence and leave, am I in trouble? Like, I'm not leaving it there, I'm just emptying the dirt and gone.
well, and that's, I would be good with like, loading and unloading in the alley, because then they can move it quickly, but then
Right.
it's like parking it in the alley, and this is where, it says parking.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay, so
I think it's just the word.
one discussion on the board is just for loading and unloading. Discussion?
I think loading and unloading is fine because I think parking creates a whole other slew of safety issues.
Okay,
Right.
I like the 10 feet because if you don't have a fence or something like that and you're over,
Okay.
why wouldn't you be able to park it back?
Mhm.
all right, discussion parking specific. So we have 3 that say just loading, unloading, discussion parking. Right?
As long as it's wide enough to
Yeah, that to me
get
is it's
everything
always
through
something
that we can possibly get
Okay.
through, that's where I'm at. So, but, you know, like you said, I mean, it's like it'd be easier, but as long as you can get through. So if for one reason they just decide we'd take a dump truck through or whatever.
The
And
consensus of the council favor it being changed when parking in the alley for loading and unloading purposes, there shall be at least 10 feet. That way it's specific for loading and unloading. So
But we still would
Well,
have to address
like-
the parking.
Yeah.
well,
that,
like,
that addresses
yeah.
it because it's only for loading and unloading.
Well, and like
So
the
if they
mayor
just
said
park it
though,
and leave it,
I
the
mean,
ones
are
that,
there-
yeah, the ones that don't have like a fence or maybe they can't park it out front, then they're going to be
yeah,
forced to
just-
park it
we're
out.
talking just the alleyway. Now, like if they got a parking
On their own
spot
property.
on
Yeah.
their own property,
Yeah,
I-
that's-
we don't care about that.
Yeah.
We're just talking specific to the right of way, town easement alleyway.
I would be fine with that. I mean,
Yeah.
if
Okay,
Yeah.
consensus?
their private parking is, or their private land is their own.
Yeah.
Right. So
Someone
just,
else is
thing.
in front of theirs and not
Yeah.
blocking somebody else's.
Yeah.
space
So-
or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah.
so in favor of adding for loading and unloading purposes.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
I mean, just off of just a side note, is there a lot of vehicles that just get parked in the alleyways and get left or is that not really a big issue?
Not a ton. I mean, we address them when they get called in or we see them.
Okay.
Like Public Works is really good about like, you know, for instance, we had one just over here between Curtis and Holmes. Guy, truck stuck, it was broken, it was blocking where they couldn't get the dumpster. Guy was quasi evicted and so statutorily, there's a thing that any vehicle that's blocking a lane of traffic, we don't have to go through the whole 24-hour tow thing. You just can tow it.
Oh, okay.
So we just address it that way. All right, so any other discussion on D?
Nope.
All right, hearing none. 24. Incremental movements or removal of the RV/trailer for a period less than 48 hours shall not be considered in determining the length of the time the trailer/or RV have been parked at a particular location. So that is tied to A, beginning, it says they be here 48 hours and then they have to be gone 48 hours.
Mm-hmm. Can't just move it around the
Okay.
block.
Any other discussion about leaving it in place, changing it up? Okay, hearing no discussion on 24. Okay, F, hoses, electrical cords, drain pipes, and or any other thing that obstructs a sidewalk are prohibited. Now, behind sidewalk, let's do comma, streets, addressing that concern about slide outs, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Streets are prohibited unless there are active loading and unloading occurring, and then adding a section about, or a line about slide outs.
Or could you just, under F, hoses, electrical cords, drain pipes, slide outs?
I'm gonna work on that simply because some slide outs, if they're on the sidewalk side, it's not obstructing a street. If they're loading and unloading, if you already got cords and stuff there, is a slide out gonna be that big of a deal? So let's have the discussion.
Yeah.
On the street side, we don't want the slide outs out because of traffic. But what about the sidewalk side? Since you're initially the one that brought that concern up, thoughts?
I was just thinking about the street area. I didn't realize this, I didn't think about the sidewalk.
For the bigger ones, yeah.
That's why I prolonged just getting here.
I didn't
So,
think about the sidewalk.
so
Just
discussion.
like mine, I've got slide outs on both sides.
I'm just thinking, you know,
Mine
yeah.
Slide out is on, would be on the sidewalk side. I could take up the whole sidewalk.
Yeah.
So, discussion. Sidewalks, no sidewalks.
Well, I mean, it's,
That's how we work these out.
My thought, this is my thought on that. Okay, so Janelle brings her camper home.
Mhm.
She has her slide out. She's actively working in there, vacuuming, you know what I mean, vacuuming, whatever. If she is actively doing it, and then like, let's say 30 minutes or whatever, I don't know, I'm not saying time. She's actively, you know, cleaning or fixing the seal and then put it back in when you're done. She's not leaving it for an extended amount of time.
unintended.
Right. And I would have no problem if she's actively, you know, working in her.
I kind of think along those lines that goes
Mhm.
along with that loading and unloading.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I know some of the
Okay.
trailers
You have to.
So-
walk through unless you at least bring them out
Yeah,
a little bit.
Right.
Discussion? Thoughts? So do you want to define in the ordinance slide outs curb and sidewalk, just one side or the other, or just simply as long as they're actively doing it, you don't care?
I think actively.
As long
Yeah.
as you're actively loading and unloading.
Right. Well, no, well,
Because here's the thing is if you're actively unloading and loading, and then if for some reason it's like, you know, they said, well, you know what, we're going to stay in here tonight and stuff. Now that's going to be where you're going to have to draw the line a little bit. So, but if they're like, you know, like they said, you know, currently cleaning it up or something, because there are a lot of campers that you have to at
Right.
least slide it out a little bit just to even get something.
Yeah,
Well, we have to open our slide to load it.
right.
Yeah, just to even get to that.
Even on the refrigerator side, on the street
So,
side. But something else to keep in mind too, because, you know, people are parking their campers in front of houses and then they're having guests come and stay in their campers. And they're pulling their slide
And-
outs out.
But I
We
thought
may-
we can't, I thought there's an
Well,
ordinance.
see, that wouldn't be actively loading or unloading.
Right,
So
so
that's-
there's an ordinance that says you can do it for 5 days if it's like immediate family. Other than that, you have to camp at a designated camp spot. So if your brother Chad shows up with his camper, technically they can camp. Now, this might be a good time to have that discussion since we're talking trailers, campers, RVs, that if they're camping for 5 days, which is allotted by another ordinance, do you want those things out on both sides? Probably not. So we may need to, and I thought about actually incorporating the camping thing in to this as a whole and redoing it all as one.
Yeah. Well, I think that would be going back into the enforcement. I mean, it's already hard enough to enforce it as it is right now. So enforcing family, not family, you know, my buddy Chad is actually now my brother Chad. And it's like, yeah,
Right, so,
He's not gonna
Okay.
come in on the mama.
so,
Daddy, his mama.
so I'm hearing consensus, as long as the slide, the slides are okay either side, as long as they're actively loading, unloading, cleaning.
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
with that said, we have the opportunity to add a section. Do you want to incorporate the camping ordinance into this one as a whole and just simply say no more than XYZ days unless you're in a designated camping area? And you could not say, it doesn't have to be family, you could just say days. Do you want to incorporate that into one ordinance?
Can't we just get rid of it?
yeah. I mean,
So
Well,
if we strike it, that means I
well-
can,
Okay, well, yes and no. Because we have like RV. That wouldn't allow it. Basically, they could only be there 48 hours.
they can do it within their 48 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then
That's
we
what
can
I'm
just
thinking.
eliminate the other ordinance.
so weird
Off the
question, in
books.
that 48 hours, can I plug my camper in?
Here's the thing is you can run it off a battery for a couple days.
Yep.
So
Now-
you can't have it in. It's just like not having a generator after 10 o'clock out at the lake. I
Okay.
mean, you can still run a camper.
So hearing in favor, doing away with the other ordinance, using just one ordinance. I'm gonna propose this question because it'll come up. What if somebody wants an extension because Uncle Sue and Aunt Bob from Arizona who are retired are gonna be here 5 days,
Park in
which
the
is
driveway.
longer than 48.
Park in the driveway or
Park
Say
in the driveway.
48 and that's it? No extensions?
48 no extensions. I feel like if we start making
Yeah.
extensions, if we start doing stuff,
Okay.
then we're going to be right back into the pickle
Yep.
that we're in now.
Okay,
yeah.
so any other discussion on F?
Yeah.
Hearing none, moving forward,
You know,
29.
'cause it's only what, like $30 a night or something over, you
Yeah.
know, this right over here. So.
All right, so G, travel trailers, box trailers, trailers,
I actually
RVs.
do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just thinking about like, because I know that we've been focusing a lot on RVs and all of that, but what about like the flatbed trailers, work truck tape trailers, all of that? Like, do we need to address anything that could be hanging out of those trailers? Or
Like camping that.
well, you could camp in a flatbed. I mean, you probably could, but I'm just wondering, like, because a lot of F is just covering RVs, right? I'm just wondering, like,
Well,
if there were
F-
other
F
if there were
is-
other things that weren't.
F is
RV
hoses,
related.
electrical cords, drain pipes, or any other thing obstructing sidewalks are prohibited unless there are active loading, unloading activities occurring. So it doesn't define whether it's an RV trailer, flatbed. It just says anything obstructing.
So if it's like a work trailer
And if
they're
we're gonna
unloading,
add
unloading.
slide outs, so in the wording, doing something like slide outs and or doors, like,
Hmm.
windows, because
I was
Or-
just thinking that some of those
They-
bigger vehicles got
Yeah.
bigger
so-
sectionals and
Anything extending out.
pull
Right,
outs
and so-
and all
so
that jazz.
I'll put some wording into the next draft
Okay.
of this that encompasses something to that degree, if agreeable.
Mhm.
I'm fine with that. I was just thinking about all the extra pull outs and things like that.
Yeah, no, I'm.
Could come up later down the road.
Okay.
No, I see where you're getting.
I don't know
G.
what they're called.
So
I call them the pull outs.
basically RV trailers, etc., tent trailers shall be parked by the curb on the street in front of the residence, occupied by the registered owner of the vehicle. So when I say occupied residence, because it could be, they could be renting the house. So whatever their residence that they're
Mhm.
occupying. Let's see, by the registered owner trailer, unless they have secured permission from the occupant of another residence where they wish to park. Discussion.
No, the only thing that I can see on that is maybe, I mean, yes, I can see where it says in front of the residence. But are the residents going to consider across the street technically in front of it because they're going to be in front of it? So on the same side.
Well, and that's why I put curb by the
or
curb.
are we gonna do
in
it?
front?
Okay.
So now we can redefine it. We can change wording. That's why I worded it that way because I had that in mind. So curb in front of the residence,
Okay.
not across the street.
Okay.
Now we can better define that. I can work that if you want. Discussion.
It's now that you put it that way, I mean, it sounds good, but it's like, I don't know. I just,
Never crossed my mind.
if it doesn't cross
Yeah.
anybody else's mind, then it's like,
So-
we're good.
Well, no,
But it
and I-
crossed your mind, so
It crossed my
obviously it's
mind.
going to cross somebody else's.
Well, and I had that come up and I thought about it. So that's why I worded it that way, was the curb in front of your house.
Mhm.
Because generally, I think most reasonable people wouldn't consider the curb across the street as being in front of
Yeah.
the house.
I'm just thinking of like the houses that don't have houses across the street. And that's the
Oh,
reason.
like a blank lot.
Like a blank lot or something
Okay.
like that. Or like, like somebody's fence right there. I don't know, just something.
So what we can do, let's take some time to think about that. We don't have to work that one out tonight. So we got some other stuff, and for propriety of time,
Absolutely.
because when you put this in front of the council, 3 readings, each time, if there's something you want to change or amend or delete or add, that's what each reading's for.
Mm-hmm.
So we can reach out to the attorney and be like, hey, can you have a better way of wording it? Or if one of you guys come up with something better, it's not that big a deal to shoot me an email or call me like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
consider this. Any other discussion on H?
No.
Okay, do you think it's appropriate about, as far as like park in front of your place? If you want to park it elsewhere, get
You mean on
permission?
G. Yeah.
Or G, I mean, sorry,
Yeah.
G.
Yeah. No,
Sorry, I'm moving ahead.
yeah.
So other than the curb,
Other than I like that because then that'll be, I mean,
Okay.
again, I don't want some trailer just parked in front of my house just because.
Right, right now, we're not-
Yeah. No, I
You don't
I
know
like
who
it.
did that trailer.
okay, moving on to H.
That is a safety issue.
Okay, now, and this, I'm just trying to find some way for our officers and the community to be civil with each other to resolve potential problems. So one of the discussions was, what about if 2 trailers are parked across from each other? Because then you have the choke point. And like 6th Street is a good example of that. There's a boat trailer and
Mhm.
we did get them to turn correctly around, but there's still a choke point. Okay. So this idea was what I came up with. You don't have to like it. I'm not going to be offended. Should 2 trailers or RVs be parked across from one another on any town, street, highway causing a complaint or safety concern to the public, which when I say safety complaint, that opens the door for the officers if they see it as discussion for enforcement. Oh, that's a problem.
Mhm.
We're going to address it to the public. The second person to park shall be the one to move their RV or travel trailer. If it cannot be determined who parked first or addressed civilly by both owners, or both owners shall remove their trailer or RVs for at least 72-hour period. Now, this was based on a complaint-driven concept. So if we could reword things, rework it. Let's start with whether you like it or dislike it.
Okay, go ahead.
I like it. I like the communication between people working together. And this is one of those situations where it's not strictly based on that complaint, as you had mentioned there. And if we can't get along, everybody loses. That's my opinion.
Provides
Well,
me for
yeah.
recess.
Well, and I agree on that also.
Okay,
Because again, some of the citizens that came to the last meeting, said to use some common sense. Well, hopefully we can use that common sense out there. And if we can't work it out civilly, then these fine gentlemen will.
it's like a rule of the game. So
Yeah.
consensus, yes?
The only thing that
Agree.
I'm thinking is, are we thinking 72 hours is a good time period? Or is 3 days a good time period? Or is it, do we go back to a 48? So it's just like 48, 48, 48, 48.
Yeah,
Right.
I think we should just have the same
I want to
consistency.
stick to 48? Okay, striking 72, putting in 48. Any other discussion on H?
Mm-mm.
Hearing none, moving on to I. No travel trailer, RV, or other recreational trailer shall be parked in the open space from the front of the residence, extending the full width of the lot to the curb, so as to not block the view of the postal or the posted address, the front door, or access sidewalk from the curb. Exceptions are designated parking that is on, and I need to add either side, I think would probably be more appropriate, of the residence or backyards.
Mhm. I like how
Thoughts and
you,
discussion.
I like how it says does not block the access to the sidewalk going up to the house, because that's where, that'll definitely prevent somebody from, unless they have a very small camper or a trailer or anything like that, then it'll at least help you guys, fire, anybody, ambulance, public work, anybody going up to the front door,
And
even
curb-
UPS.
Curb appeal to town.
Absolutely.
Okay, discussion?
I'm still trying to digest the
Okay.
wording.
Yeah, because up here you talk about travel trailers, small trailers, flatbed trailers, livestock trailers, RVs, tent trailers. Down here, it's no travel trailer, RV, or other recreational trailer.
And I can make the adjustment, so it's just trailers in general.
Mhm.
Probably what happened.
Or RVs, motorhomes.
So this draft was off the original draft, and I probably didn't catch all the fix-its.
So what maybe we do is just make a reference to trailers and then we have
Definition of trailer.
Definition.
section that defines. what-
Okay.
So my question on like the 38, 39 part in there, where it says shall be parked in the open space in front of the residence.
Shall not.
Right, but I'm confused. So can I bring my trailer home to load and unload?
You just can't park it on the grass or
Oh.
park it between the
But I
door.
thought we could,
and-
we can't park it in front. Okay.
That's what that is.
Okay.
And you
Sorry,
can't,
I'm
yeah,
like-
and you can't
Yeah,
block
so-
the sidewalk, the access to get to the front door, which
Yeah, we're
Okay, I got
defining
you.
basically the yard space from front of the house to the curb.
Okay. I was like, then that says I can't bring it home to load and unload. Okay, I'm with you guys.
Only if you want
Okay.
to step out the front door.
Okay,
right,
so-
get a trailer.
Definition add, what trailers are. Clean up under I for adding trailers.
Then you can just reference one word.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion about I, lines 38 through 42? On this side,
nothing for me.
hearing no other discussion. Moving on to penalty J, line 43. Penalty on a complaint initiated offense. The fine shall be $75 per day upon a conviction in court. And trailer, it should be and, not and. Trailer and RV is still present in violation. The conviction shall be towed. And then there's a clause that says a person shall not be in violation of this section if the person removes a vehicle or trailer from the town street or alleyway within 24 hours after notice of the complaint-driven violation has been posted. Thoughts, discussion on penalty, how do you want this addressed? Now, this is where it comes to, okay, so either the officer sees it and or we got a complaint-driven complaint, okay? And they're not in compliance. So we've said, like, I'll use the section about 2 trailers. So they're not complying. Obviously, if they're not going to comply, we're going to write some citations. So here's where we come down to the penalty. What is the what's the redeeming side of this? How do we gain compliance? What's the fines? what's your thoughts? Now, I started with $75. Some discussion was we didn't want it too steep. But again, this is more of a community discussion.
Mhm.
Do you want to up it? Do you want to lower it? Do you want to change the concept? This is why we're having the discussion.
What's the fine right now to be on the cell phones?
It's $75 first offense, 125 second, and then I think it's 200 for.
I was gonna say, I thought it was like right around the 75 also. So yeah, even though I think that's a lot higher of a offense, cell phone, but yeah. Well, and that's the thing is
Right.
$75 a day. It could be 100,
Right.
100, yeah. Yeah.
Right, it can be. So,
Yeah. So
you take, because typically you always set court out 2 weeks, so 14 times 75 ends up being $1,050.
yeah. So I mean, I think
Well,
70.
people even buy campers?
I think
So-
$75 a day is good. You get it too steep, you know, it's one thing. Then if you don't do it enough, if you do like, you know, $15 a day or $20 a day, people are gonna be like,
Now,
yeah, I'll take it. Here's
one thing I didn't put in here so that you guys understand, because I didn't put in the up to $750 probation and jail, it would strictly be fine only
Okay.
Mhm.
because of the way this is worded. If you want to have potential jail time penalty being held overhead, I would have to include and or up to so many days in jail, et cetera. I don't feel that trailer should be a jailable thing.
I mean, especially when we have robbers out there.
That'd be more of a failure to
Okay.
comply with the courts, and then then they
And
get a warrant.
Now,
going.
yeah, and if they get a failure to comply, that's a whole different.
Yeah, that's a whole
animal.
other thing.
So,
So
okay, so I just want to make sure everybody understood that.
That's good.
Okay, so you're good with $75 per day?
Mhm.
Okay. What are your thoughts about the towing after 12 hours upon conviction? Do you want to tow as soon as possible after conviction and not removed? Do you want a 12-hour window? You want 48? Do you want?
I was looking at that. I don't know what you guys all think is, court's usually what at 5,
4 o'clock?
4 o'clock. So, I mean, they have to move it within 12 hours. I say, it's like no more than 24 hours, because then that would give them a full day.
Right, because
So-
12 would be, must be through the night.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so consensus is 24 hours. Okay, striking 12, putting in 24. Okay, and then as far as it shall be towed, everybody consensus? Yes, no, okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so the last part of this, a person shall not be in a violation of this section, which is the ordinance, if the person removes the vehicle trailer, and for all comforts purposes, we'll define trailers and RVs within 24 hours after notice of a complaint-driven violation and or the officer observing it has been posted. Are you good with that? Basically, if they comply and say, hey, there's an issue, move it or else. Good, consensus?
Typically,
Discussion?
yeah, typically within 24 hours, you can usually, contact. I mean, usually get it moved.
Okay,
So is that going to be 24 hours of notice, like contact notice, or just like
well,
action?
so that's where we're having discussion. So we can have discussions like in the current nuisance ordinance violation. So if you make contact about your grass, you have, is it 3 days? And then if we don't make contact, we post it, it's 10 days.
Mhm.
And I don't think we necessarily want to follow that because it's a grass driven junk stuff.
It's a lot of
This is
days.
specific trailers that are on street, or highway of the town. So is it posted? Typically if we put an abandoned sticker on there, it's 24 hours, but they're not abandoned.
Correct.
They're just not. Do we want to, so like Brandy, so I just ordered a bunch of these little red tag door hangers. So if she doesn't make contact, is that enough that says, hey, you're in violation of that? Is that considered posted in your minds? It says, hey, and if we come back and we see it gone off the door and the wind didn't take it, I would say that's arguable enough to say that they received the notice. Would you rather it be knock first, which typically we do, if like an off and talk, and then posted if we don't make contact? You want it defined as contact versus posted, or just 24 hours period?
Well, and
What?
this is where my little brain's thinking right now is, if we knock on the door, it's a lot of the times, yes, they're not going to answer because they see you guys and they don't want to deal with you guys because they're like, it's the popo at the door. Again, they're not going to deal with you. So they're either not going to answer. The ones that are going to answer, I mean, that's one thing. But, what if, somebody gets sick in the hospital and now they're in the hospital for a night or they're visiting somebody out of town and they don't realize that it's a nuisance or that it's a problem. So, 24 hours, they come home, now their camper's gone. Now it's going to be a whole, a lot more money because now they got to get it from the tow yard. So that's where I'm kind of coming in is, the 24 hours of the notice is, I'm good with 24 hours of the notice of a contact person, but then it's like,
Okay,
do
so
we
let's-
wait 3
let's-
days?
Let's discuss 24 hours with contact.
Yeah.
Consensus discussion on contact. That means you knock, you answer the door, or if for some reason we have your phone number, you answer.
Mhm.
Find us contact. So we can discuss the other.
And I'm even good with the tag on the door. And as long as, it's,
So we can
justified.
discuss no contact. Let's define contact first. Time frame contact.
I think it's if you put a note on the door.
Okay, let me clarify. Contact is either verbal
Mhm.
or physical contact with that owner. So if I show up, knock on your door, you answer it, that's contact.
Mhm.
Or if I call you and you answer it, that's contact.
Yep.
So it's 24 hours by contact, not posting. We'll discuss non-contact after this. So 24 hours contact, reasonable? Or you want more time, less time?
I almost, and I hate to even say it because it's more work, because posting is when you can't make contact and you put a
Correct.
sticker on. So I almost would prefer, in case someone is in the hospital, something happens, we try to make contact. We don't make contact, we do a follow-up, and if there's no contact, then we post. And then go 24 hours on posting.
Okay,
My
so.
thought, but that's a double, that's putting your guys out there
Well,
twice.
okay, so let's start with we make contact. We've actually had a discussion, whether it be in person or phone.
Mhm.
What is the reasonable time with the contact? So that you're either at home or we contact you on phone. And then we'll have the discussion about follow-ups and non-contact. So if we, hey there, Mr. Joe Blow citizen, here's an issue here. What is reasonable for that compliance?
I say if you're knocking at my door, I'm going to either move it right now or, it's definitely going to be gone within the next day. So it better be gone
Yeah.
within 24 hours.
24 hours, okay. So 24 hours. Now, let's move the discussion to non-contact. So what is, okay, so basically, so upon non-contact, and this is not defined, so this is open for discussion for non-contact. So what is, do we do a follow-up? If follow-ups can become cumbersome. We can potentially flag CAD or dispatch to have it reopened in 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever. Now, when it's reopened, okay, so we show up to council lady here on my left's residence. There's no contact made. Happens to be Friday at 5 p.m. She may have left for the weekend. Now, code enforcement doesn't typically work weekends. So if you flag it to open on the weekend, most likely officers aren't going to handle it because of whatever else is going on. So it would sit and or not be reopened until Monday. So discussion was on the table about what if, there's emergencies, things that come up. I think that we can build something into this that if it's, out that there's an emergency, we can build that into here. So beyond the emergency side of it, because we can separate that in definition. So there's no emergency, we don't make contact, define, what is reasonable at that point.
So do you have to define? Can you go back to officer discretion? on
We,
some of that?
well, we can. So two things. If you define it, this is the way it is. So then we don't have arguments. or officer discretion, then it opens the doors for arguments of, well, he got away with blah, 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 blah. Why don't I get that leeway? So we can do it as officer discretion if there's no contact made. However, I think defining a time, like, hey, like,
We still have to revisit it and then post, like, what-
right. So if there's no contact made, there's a part of me that says post it and then give them, say, 72 hours. And then because we have some really good citizens who, if they see something posted, hey, like, there's something going on at your residence, and then those residents reach out to us. So obviously, if it's an emergency going on, I think that's reasonable to say, okay, it's fine till the emergency's over with. So I think defining, what the time frame is, that the violation is after no contact. So basically, there's no contact, we post it. I think it makes it simpler just to say, okay, so no contact, the complaint's not been dealt with for XYZ time. It is now deemed a violation with the exception of an emergency. So what is that reasonable time? So you've already given them 24 hours because we made contact, but in case there isn't contact, so they're sleeping, didn't answer the door because they work nights, or it'd be in the evening, they've already left for a night shift, or they went to Deadwood gambling for the weekend. Is 72 hours enough? You want to go longer, shorter? Is it 48?
I would think 72 hours, in my opinion, would be good. And then, but here's the thing though, too, and I'm just trying to think of this out loud a little bit now, is if we do this though, people that are complaint driven, they're going to call you up. They're not going to answer the door. Then they can have it for another 72 hours on the road. Is there a way that we can monitor that? Be like, hey, okay, now you've had so many complaints on there. Now we're going to really up the fine. We're going to do something. I mean, I don't know, just something along the line of repeat offenders, because now we just upped it to 72 hours that they can keep it on, 72 hours plus the 24 hours on the street.
So for a discussion point, we could go back to the fine section and build in a portion for repeat offenders. So like second offense, third offense, fourth offense, that can be another discussion.
Okay. Yep.
If amenable for those repeat offenders.
I just think, because then people are going to try to get out of it somehow by not answering the door.
Right.
I
So,
knew that. I wouldn't answer
so I
the door
think
myself.
if we don't make contact, and at that point, if we don't make contact, opposite 24 hours for contact doesn't apply. So upon no contact, 72 hours posted, then at that point, the violation can be cited and or towed. Now, do you want to start with?
So after the 72 hours, and that's when they'll get the sticker, and
No,
then,
So, okay.
Posted right away.
Yeah, so I'm gonna use this
Oh, okay.
as an example of the door flyer, right? So, okay, so, hey, council lady, you don't answer the door. We post it by putting either this little door hanger on your door, or we have a printout that we tape to your door.
Mhm.
Okay, that's posted.
Mhm.
Now, that's when the clock starts. So when your neighbor over here, Mr. Scott, calls it in, or for whatever reason, the officer sees it and says, okay, we're gonna address it. So in CAD, so when the call is created, so we're like, hey, show me out at this lady's house at blah, 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 address at, 123 Elm Street. There's a timestamp that starts
oh, okay.
in the CAD. So it's tracked. So from there, we can say, okay, no contact made, please reopen at 72 hours from this point. So now let's move to discussion. What do you want to happen at that point? Still in violation? Now, typically you have the right to go to court. So in my opinion, from law enforcement, and I'm sure the attorney will agree, we should have a citation issued where they have their chance in court. Agreed? Okay,
Mhm.
so cite,
Think it's cite unless it's deemed,
Okay.
traffic hazard, and then you're going to tow it anyway.
Right, which that, we don't
It's
even have to
totally
address
different.
that in here
No,
because we
it's
already
totally different.
have statute that says if a vehicle, trailer, et cetera, is in the lane of travel that causes a safety issue, we can just tow it.
Yeah, you can just
So
get
this
rid
is addressing anything that's in violation of the 48 hours.
No.
And moving forward. So I don't think we have to deal with
Nope.
that side of the thing. So,
of- yeah.
so citation. Okay.
Mhm.
issued. Okay. So, let's see. So I think that addresses that. So 47 will add on contact after the 24 hours. So now if we don't make contact basically, and it's removed within 72 hours, no violation. Consensus? Okay, all right. So moving on, 48, and then we'll come back to the repeat violators.
Mhm.
So line 48, trailers used by contractors for construction projects shall obtain a permit. Should be from, not form. Sorry. From the police department for the duration of the project with no cost being charged. Discussion.
I think that we need to address something about, like, in my mind, when I think about a contractor and I think a contractor for construction projects, that doesn't cover all the people who, like with what Daisha was saying, the people who own businesses, who have business vehicles, business trailers, business campers, business, whatever it is. So I just think that the wording needs to be changed a little bit to cover that, because then that would solidify what some of the residents were talking about of, please don't take away my livelihood.
Mhm.
If they can, if they can show,
Show proof that
if they can show
that's-
proof that like that's their business vehicle or whatever. I think that if we leave it to contractors for construction projects, that's
And when you-
too,
Yeah, I think that
too
when you have
open.
it worded like that, that makes me think that 123 Roofing Street is coming over to his house to do the work, not, this is my,
Your hot shot,
Mhm.
whatever.
yeah, this is my business,
Yeah.
and so I'm just gonna park it.
So
because I think that that needs to be defined.
And I'm sorry if I'm gonna word it well when I try to say it, but
Nope.
yeah,
Okay.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm gonna direct a conversation to our town clerk. So we have, do you call of anybody currently that has a business license or has that kind of stuff where they
We
would,
have to look almost beyond that because you might be an employee for a business somewhere else if you bring your work truck home with you every day.
We
Mhm.
have a truck and
Yeah.
trailer parked on the street.
And that was
Okay.
what
So
two
this
residents had brought up.
business, I mean, the zoning regs,
Right.
um, address a lot of that, because that home business has to be secondary to that residential home.
okay,
But you got a lot of work trucks.
employees. Now, so trucks are different than trailers and RVs. So for employees,
But what if I have
But you
my
may-
truck hooked up to my
Trailer.
trailer?
Take every day to looking to work and I can come back.
so it's,
But then the same argument can be, well, that's my work truck trailer. But I haul snowmobiles and no snowmobile.
Ooh,
Or home my RV, my
Because,
work truck.
because we have an enclosed trailer, we haul our snowmobiles.
so if they're actively working, the trailer is going to be coming and going daily, other than their days off.
Yeah, it's not going to be parked there for
Which-
more than 48 hours.
Unless they're on vacation at the hospital from a work injury or something, which would fall under the emergency stuff built in, or will be.
Mhm.
Would it even apply to this if they're coming and going? Is, I think, a
I guess
discussion.
not because we're
Because
looking at.
it's not
This
parked
is
there for
parking
consistent, yeah. The
Yeah,
consecutive
this
48
is-
hours, they're not
This
going to be
is
parked.
parked consecutive.
Even on a weekend and stuff, even if they park it for a full weekend, they're going to be moving it following day. And then they can, yeah. The only thing that it wouldn't be gone for 48 hours before it parks there again. But I mean,
But at
again,
least it would be gone for
it-
8 hours, 10 hours, 12, whatever their
Yeah.
work time frame is.
and I think that was the big issue with everybody, was that don't mess with our livelihood. Don't fine us, don't fee us for getting out there and working and
Mhm.
owning a company.
So like over Labor Day, that's a holiday. Hey,
Yeah.
we're going to Jackson for the weekend, just park, leave your truck, I'm gonna leave it hooked up, that's, you know what I mean, do you get what I'm saying, like, it's a long period of time.
But do we have those guys come into the office and and talk to Janelle or whatever and say, hey, this is my permit to being that I do have a work, this is a work trailer? Because
So what I'm hearing on your end, would it be applicable to add into K? So we talk about contractors and or employees who have work trailers that come and go.
Wouldn't that be beneficial for everyone to know anyway?
I think it could. Would that be amenable? Do you think that would work? So that we're not affecting livelihoods of people working who, and I don't, from patrolling the community, I don't see a ton of people that work and bring a truck trailer with them. I think the discussion is more meant for if it happens in the future. What if? So that's my,
and if we don't
Wow.
charge them, for a permit, but we just make sure we verify what business they're working for, or whatever, and they're utilizing it for work. I mean, yeah, they could be lying to us,
and now,
but
but we
hopefully
can
not.
define it with language. So you can define, so a permit for contractors doing this and or employees who the employer has a truck trailer, and we could define that they can't be there, they can't be left parked more than whatever their
Mhm.
stay at the home is or something. We can define that language
Mhm.
so that it covers these people, so it's not affecting livelihood, but then they're not just leaving it there for 2 weeks at a time, or
Mhm.
48 hours or whatever.
I do think that we
It's
should
gonna be complaint driven too, right?
Mhm.
I do think that we should put, like, because in my mind, a contractor is different than a business owner. And so I do think that there's a difference between a business owner who owns the residence versus a contractor who's working for that business owner, because a contractor is not a W-2 employee. So then I just want to make sure we have the wording correctly, because a 1099 independent contractor is not an employee. I just want to cover this so that there's no confusion later down the road, because a contractor also is not a business owner either. I just want to make sure that the wording is accurate.
Or, because we don't really have that issue right now, what if we not define or worry about it, and only if it becomes an issue, come back and revisit it? Or would you rather it?
I think we need to address.
it
I think
now.
we need to address it, being that it was brought up numerous different times last year and this year when we were discussing.
As much as I would like to, hold off on things, I don't think we should at this point.
Employees with work
Or
trailers
business permits or whatever.
that
Yeah.
may be required to bring home, something to that degree, are exempt as long as said trailer comes and goes in whatever, like on a daily basis, or?
I wouldn't say
But-
daily.
Or
Weekdays.
Yeah, it's.
But I'm wondering about
Um,
the word trailer though, because some businesses don't have trailers. They've got larger vehicles. So like on, was it 6th Street? Like going to Bozeman, and you live down a few blocks from me.
Mhm.
So there's this, it's not like a semi, but it's a larger vehicle. It's like a tow truck size vehicle.
Hmm.
I don't know what that would be called.
Mhm.
Class B.
Class B. So there's a Class B red, big, huge vehicle that is always on 6th Street, and they normally park on the right-hand side, and they're normally there for days. I'm assuming that person, is like a week on, week off type thing. I'm thinking that's what happens. But would that Class B vehicle qualify under a trailer? Because I know that I've seen those several times.
Truck ordinance.
Okay,
So,
so that would qualify
Yeah.
under that.
yeah, that
Okay,
would
I just
follow,
wanted to
'cause
double
there's-
check.
So there's ordinances about truck routes in town, that you're not supposed to have trucks with the exception of if you're moving and,
A point, a destination. to
yeah,
and
point of
from.
destination, you know, it's like,
Okay.
like on your street, it's not technically a truck route, but if
Yeah.
you ordered a couch from American Family in Denver and they show up with a Class A
Yeah.
truck to deliver it, then it's a point of destination and load.
Yeah, and these red trucks, they're Class B big red trucks, but then they have a huge long flatbed trailer on them. So that's why I'm wondering, because technically it's a big Class B truck, but it's like a flatbed trailer. I've seen it several times. It's parked on the right hand side of the road, and I've seen it several times parked there. So I'm just wondering, does it qualify under that, or is it going to qualify under this? Because technically it's a flatbed big trailer.
Probably with a commercial, whatever your commercial.
Yeah, if it's attached.
Yeah,
not
if
a
it's
trailer.
attached, that
Okay.
falls under
Yeah.
commercial stuff. So next
Okay.
time you see it, call us.
Okay.
So we can look into that.
As long as
Yeah.
it's
Call
like
and
a
say
car
you're-
haul.
Candace Scott.
All right, so, employees with work trailers that may be required to bring, so basically bring to their occupied residence, are exempt as long, and I think it needs to be defined that, so they just can't show up and leave park. I think you should define it as long as they're
Parked in front of their house or parked in,
actively
actively.
being moved from day to day.
Well, you
Actively in
almost gotta
use.
be weekday because.
Because they don't, sometimes they don't work at the
Because it's
weekends
actively
or.
in use.
Well, on the
Yeah.
weekend, me, I'd be like, my equipment, I'm the employer, I want it at my place on the weekend, but that's me.
You
I
would
don't know.
think. I
But-
mean,
So, okay, so.
Well, I
bring-
know, some of them, they would rather bring them home than leave them on the job site because of
There's that too. So
mhm.
actively, okay, so as long as said trailers are being moved on any weekday
regular basis.
or week.
'Cause if we-
weekday,
Yeah.
This weekend is 48 hours. So that
Weekend-
would fall within
48 hours.
48 hours. So as long as it's being actively moved throughout the week, that doesn't mess with livelihood. If
Mhm.
it happens to sit there through the weekend, 48 hours, and then it moves again because it's being actively moved, then
Okay, 48 hours, including weekends and holidays.
I'm just, because weekend is 48 hours, 24 and 24 is 48. So weekend is typically Saturday, Sunday.
Correct.
Now,
But
Do you
what
want-
if
And Monday's
there's,
Labor Day, and we don't work on Monday, so.
so do you want to define it as 48 hours and or weekends with holidays attached?
I would put holidays attached because there's a lot of
Yeah.
the businesses that don't work
Okay.
on holidays.
Okay, so on weekdays,
Because that will at least
Yeah.
protect the residents.
Well, and then like around
And
Christmas
or-
time, things like that, where I mean, they do
weekends
take.
where applicable, and I probably will come up with a legal wording for this, but this is just a
Mhm.
note for me.
Thanksgiving.
Applicable holidays apply. So that way they have to apply to that. Is that working? Okay?
And even, and here's the thing is if somebody does complain after that, whatever, it goes back into the discretion and you can be all like, hey, you know what?
Okay.
You're good.
Yeah.
All right. Any other discussion on employees potentially with trailers coming and going? Okay, I think the last point of discussion was repeat offenders. Do you want to put something in about repeat offenders into the penalty?
I would say I would want to put something in with repeat offenders only for the fact that if we're giving them 72 hours for the complaint, after the complaint to remove their stuff, if they don't
So-
answer, they're just not
So
going to answer.
first offense, you're good with $75 as it is.
But in the end, would we need the second offense if it gets towed? You know what I mean? How if he pays the whatever to get it out and brings it back, keeps doing it, then that $75 keeps adding up. Do we still need to, or does that make you end up being?
Well, once it
habitual?
gets towed, then that particular initial violation would be done with.
Mhm.
So then if they bring
Right.
it back and
Then,
they,
yeah, but
and they
then,
re-offend.
then you would still have the $75 again, right? Or you wanting to go up more?
No, so as it is, every time there's a violation, if it's cited, it would be the $75 per day. And then upon conviction after XYZ 24 hours, it would be towed. So his discussion earlier was about repeat offenders. So, because there are those people in the community,
I know a certain person
so-
who would be a repeat offender.
and you, as a collective, may not want to do additional penalties for repeat offenders and just leave it as it is. He was just looking at how do we address or having that discussion. So I guess the first question is, as a whole, do you want to address repeat offenders for those people who just like, whatever?
'Cause I mean, I know the $75 is going to add up day after day after day after day. My biggest thing is once that complaint it's a complaint driven, thing. Chief Thompson goes over to their house, knocks on the door, they don't answer. Then we give them 72 hours or we post it for 72 hours. Okay, that gives them 72 hours. That's another 24 hours more than what the ordinance is saying that they can keep it on the road. Do we, and then after that 72 hours, they cite them up. Okay, do we start that 75? Oh,
So
it basically gives them an extra 24 hours.
So so for point of discussion, as it currently is, this is for each violation.
Mhm.
So let's say we show up, we cite you, you get fined for 3 days in violation. You just pay the fine. So technically that's a conviction.
Mhm.
So or if you go to court and so you move it, but it's 3 days after the site, it still shows 3 days. That's what your fine is upon finding guilty. So at that point, the trailer's moved, but then in 3 months, you're like, watch this. So in my mind, that would be a repeat offender
Mhm.
at that point, testing the waters again. Is that what, I think that's probably more discussion driven is, so
Mhm.
after the first time we go through this and we've given them the citation, they got their fine, no matter how many days it ends up being, and or do you want to consider a second offense or third offense, or just leave it as this is the penalty each time?
That's, yeah. I think you said it a little bit better. I was kind of confusing myself a little bit too. I just don't want them to be testing the waters all the time because we did have a lot of those, people come in here and be like, well, if you guys do this, and we're just going to go do this. And so, I mean, we want to be able to make it fair for all the community members to be like, hey, what happens to me should happen to you. But if you're going to continue just like any other law,
So
I mean, I don't know about.
do we want to step up? Okay, so 75, so like our hands-free, we have 75 first offense, second offense is, $100. So you want to step up the fine per day and go through the same process?
I feel like that could get complicated.
That- yeah, I think
that
very
could get
quickly.
In my opinion, $75 can turn into a lot of money.
It could.
And if you're repeating offense, I mean.
You're just paying more money out too.
everybody's gonna go- I mean, if you can afford to do that, you can afford to go park it somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that is
the
that is
thing
true
is-
there.
Okay.
Because to me, that's a big deterrent. That's
Yeah.
$75, even a couple of days.
I'm hearing leaving it the way it is.
Yeah, and I mean it's
And-
I think I would be good with that
Okay.
because I'm confused myself even on this, and then I'm overthinking it.
Because, my thought is once they, let's say the first offense happens, they get their fines, have to pay for, let's say, 5 days or 3 days, whatever. And then that case is closed and we redo it. That's another $75. That can add up. I mean, there ain't no Starbucks this month or next
Yeah.
month either.
Yeah. So no, I think
I
think
think
that's
a couple of times is not gonna be.
because then
Okay.
if you did do the reoffense
Yeah.
anyway, you'd have to do it
Yeah.
within a year, or within a certain amount of time, because it's like what they do last year is going to be different from this year. So no, I think we should just I agree.
Okay.
Let's just keep it with
All right,
the
so
the
repeat
daily.
offenders. Okay, we'll
Yeah,
scratch
let's just
that.
do that.
Okay. So we've worked it all the way through line 49, and we're going to add some more stuff. So for discussion, I know that, it was discussed in public comments about we want to keep this going moving forward.
Mhm.
Do you guys as council want me to put this as changes discussed today, draft and put on the agenda and then keep working it from the draft forward?
Yeah, I think it needs to be on next week's
Yeah.
agenda, if that's feasible for you to make those changes, which hopefully it is.
I can do it this week.
Okay,
Does that work for
That
you?
works for me, yeah.
Okay.
yeah, 'cause I think we need
Does-
to,
Because the
Does-
people are gonna want to know.
Okay.
Yeah, I
We've
think we
got
just
3
need to.
readings if we need.
Right.
Okay, so
Mhm.
for the town clerk's sake, in this format, do you want me to reformat this or do you leave it the way it is?
No, I think for the first, at least
Like the first reading, and then if you want to reformat to the other, do it?
Yeah, I like the numbers, I mean, if it's
I
not gonna
mean,
be,
it's easy to read.
So what you could do is send this to me, and then what I could do is just do the whereas, and if
Okay.
we're gonna repeal the current trailer ordinance.
Okay,
And now, present it.
so I will get this done this week. Okay, so we worked it, as they say in the legislature, we worked the bill. Any other discussion? Mayor?
Just.
Sorry to take over.
no, you're fine.
No, I appreciate you.
I appreciate the way you kind of addressed, broke it down into steps. So
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
I think that helped us all grasp it, just take out bites rather than, I think we're all looking at the overall
big picture.
elephant.
Okay, so do you feel this meets both sides of the discussion for the community? For the OCD, we don't like trailers versus the, we don't want to have trailer ordinances, period. Do you feel this meets in the middle?
I would think so.
I think it does. I mean, it
think
gives
someone
them
was still going
plenty.
to complain no matter what.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I think that we made it,
Yeah.
I think that it's written feasible for each party.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
I think we
We're
got,
good.
yeah.
I think
We got thousands of people to please, we're not gonna please all of them.
Yeah.
So,
town clerk, you're kind of quiet over there, thoughts?
Oh, no. This is
she's,
you guys.
she's petting Rusty.
Just asking. Don't leave you
No,
out.
I appreciate it, Chief, for all the
Pink
hard
Floyd?
work. Yeah.
This is horrible.
He's like, I'm ready to go.
He needs more seats.
So, no,
He needs more seats.
I agree.
Thank you, sir.
I'm just going to meeting at
Work
8:44.
session. We don't have to-
we don't have a turn, but because
You're supposed to say all in favor, aye.
no.
I,
So, I say we go for another 4 hours.
you can go for another 4 hours.
Oh, no, I do have to work tomorrow. Never mind. So yeah, I gotta work. I gotta work anymore.
No, you have to wait. You'll have to wait. Well,
Kelly,
you'll have to wait a minute.
I was wondering about, I know there was a guy.
I bring some snacks by.
I went off, the reason I'm asking is I